And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome to Open Connection. I'm your host, Robert Pictou. In recent years, mining investors have been hearing a lot about one of the world's hottest exploration regions, the Golden Triangle of British Columbia. This region is home to some of the world's largest and richest mineral deposits. The name Golden Triangle comes from a 500-kilometer belt of mineralization searching south from Atlin to northern British Columbia, near the border to the Yukon to Gestalt, just south of Stewart, British Columbia. On today's Open Connection, we open our archives to bring you this story from 1989.
Valleys below the jagged peaks are filled with ice and snow. Ancient glaciers still make their slow march. But prospectors did come to these parts, and the search hasn't been for naught. This is the SNIP property, a joint venture between Cominco Limited and Prime Resources. Those paying attention to the gold ruckus at the Vancouver Stock Exchange recently will recognize Prime as one of the companies under the guiding hand of stock promoter Murray Pezim. SNIP gets its rather uninspiring name from nearby Snippiker Mountain. The property is found in the area known as the Iskut Gold Camp, nestled in a narrow valley bordered by Bronson Creek, just upstream of where it joins the Iskut River. The SNIP project is still technically in the exploration phase, though talk is of mine construction and being in business next year. A look around camp shows just how serious the partners in this project are. Last winter, they built a crew accommodation building to house more than 170 at a cost over $2 million. The 5,000-foot airstrip is adequate to land a Hercules, necessary to bring in large equipment. Everything on site was flown here. But despite the monetary commitment to the project, nothing in mining is guaranteed. Project manager Merlin Royer, however, is confident SNIP will indeed become a gold mine.
Well, this is very, very far advanced. In fact, the underground development, a great deal of underground development has been done. A lot of the fill-in drilling has been done so that we know our ore body fairly well, which is the number one criteria before putting a mine into production. We have the accommodation building complete, and that's ready to house construction crews when we get going into construction. So basically we're at the point now of doing our final evaluation of the economics of the ore deposit, and all things being equal, going ahead into construction sometime, perhaps starting this fall, but certainly in earnest next spring.
What are the chances of getting this far and not making it?
Very few people would put this amount of money into a project unless we were pretty sure we had a sure thing and a go-ahead.
So does that mean this would go ahead, the whole question remains to be timing?
Nobody can say categorically because we haven't done the numbers yet, but there's every likelihood that it'll go ahead, yes.
While Cominco and Prime have obvious reasons for wanting the project to be successful, communities to the south are also looking for that success in hopes of an economic spillover their way. Terrace and Smithers continue to vie for servicing contracts for SNIP and almost every other mineral development they get wind of. Smithers currently is used by Cominco as a service base for SNIP. Sensing that community interest, Cominco invited the Chambers of Commerce from both Terrace and Smithers to send up delegates for a tour. Royer says the invitation was only neighborly and wasn't meant to fuel the competition between the communities. The Chamber members were flown in over spectacular scenery, nourished in the new cafeteria, and shown the works. The tour included the underground development, for which suitable attire had to be donned, to the existing camp, to where future development will be. Geologist Steve Kenwood handled the underground tour.
We've done about 3.5 miles of underground so far.
Where is the stuff that you took out of those tunnels?
Well, most of it is just waste. We've developed about 15,000 tons of ore, and that's sitting, we'll see a big pile of ore up at the 300 level. We'll be going to there to go in the mine. And we've also got some stored underground as well.
A ramp developed inside the mountain winds up connecting the various levels where drilling occurs.
What they've done since they drove the 2 levels, that's the first thing they did, was they drove this level, and then they went down and drove the 180 level. And then since then, we started in November this ramp that connects the 2 levels. So this thing spirals up at 15%, and the levels connect. And then we've since driven it up further to the 420 level. There's another portal up at the 420 level. You can't drive to it, and there's no access to it because it breaks out on a cliff. So those are the workings we've got right now. We're going to go in on this level and have a look at some of the ore on this level, and we'll go down to another level on the 260.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Thanks for staying with us. Opening a new mine or expanding an existing operation can be a challenging and daunting task. Aside from assessing and evaluating social environmental concerns and designing the mining and mineral movement approach, the first question is often asked, how much will it cost? Let us return to the archives to discover some of the things that need to be considered when opening a mine.
Unfortunately, the lack of light inside the mountain precludes any video of the 3.5 miles of underground workings, except for this brief look at the entrance to one of the tunnels. Once mining begins, ore will be removed from the mountain here, through a portal yet to be opened. An ore storage area will be built just outside the portal, and a short distance away is the site of the mill. One potential concern with gold mines is the use of cyanide in liberating the gold from the ore. That's not going to be the case here. Norm Ringstad of the Mines Branch in Victoria says because of the environmental sensitivity, cyanide won't be used here. Instead, an ore milling process will be used to produce a concentrate. That in turn will be flown off the site, likely to Wrangell, Alaska, and shipped to another location for gold production. There are still environmental areas that need to be addressed, though.
There are still some concerns. The quality of the effluent, and every plant produces an effluent, and ours will go into a tailings pond, and then subsequently, after clarification, eventually into the Iskut River. That will be subject to the normal constraints of heavy metals content and turbidity and all kinds of other things. Yeah.
At the time of this Skeena Journal production, the Provincial Mine Development Steering Committee was in its final review of Cominco's Stage 1 report. Approval of the Stage 1 and an addendum to it means approval in principle for the gold project and paves the way for mine construction. Word on the approval is expected at any time. Meanwhile, the company continues its own evaluation of the project, sampling ore, and sending those samples away for analysis, constantly expanding what's known about the property and working out the ever-important economics.
Even a high-grade deposit like the one we have here, which is about 7/10 of an ounce per ton. Anything over half an ounce is considered a good high-grade mine. This one is 7/10, undiluted. But even that is only about 25 parts per million. In other words, 25 parts gold, 1 million parts rock. So it's in very, very small concentrations. So the sampling procedures are very critical. You have to get lots of samples, first of all, to make it representative. And secondly, your assaying techniques have to be very good, because with that minute quantity, you can be plus or minus 20%, and that's not nearly good enough for the economic calculations you have to do. But it takes a great deal of drilling to actually define and prove the ore. There are different categories of ore as defined by the Securities Commission. The best category, of course, being proven ore. That means you know it's there and you can go and mine it. There's another that's potential ore, and then possible ore, and there are 3 or 4 other categories, which are all based on inference and indication, but there's no guarantee the ore is going to be there.
One thing that would improve the economics of the SNP project is road access.
There's quite a lot of interest, of course, among the private sector in having a road in here. And there's also quite a lot of interest in the BC government circles as well. There's recently been an act passed. I think it has had third reading and will become law in early September, Bill 57, which will enable private mining companies to build access roads to develop mineral properties.
The thought of pushing roads through this wild and mountainous region likely makes the blood of the average wilderness preservationist run cold, but Royer says the idea is for a private road not open to the public.
It's essentially a private road. It's in no sense a public road open to indiscriminate tourism and fishing and hunting and all that sort of thing.
Royer adds while the mine isn't tied to getting a road, it would help.
It would certainly improve the economic viability enormously, and it would make a tremendous impact to our neighbors up the hill, Skyline, with whom we've been in a lot of discussion.
So while Caminco works out the economic feasibility for the SNP project and waits for provincial government approval, it does seem likely there's going to be a gold mine here. And in looking at all the activity in the surrounding area within the Iskut camp and nearby Eskay Creek and Galore Creek camps, it also seems more than possible that Caminco's SNP project and Skyline's Johnny Mountain project just up the hill are going to have some gold mining neighbors.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome back to Open Connection. If you ever heard the phrase company town, Cassiar would be a prime example. In 1952, Cassiar Asbestos Company opened the mine and mill with the miners and construction workers living in tents. They next built a town near the mine to house mine workers and families. The company provided municipal services such as water, sewer, and electricity. Services for families including schools, churches, and medical facilities. Let us return to the archives to bring you this story from 1992.
The end of another day's work at the Cassiar Asbestos Mine. Every shift these miners work brings them closer to their last shift. The Cassiar Mine is shutting down in 6 months.
What's morale like around here?
Not too good. Not too good right now. Pretty low, actually.
Yeah. How are you going to deal with that over the next 6 months?
I don't know. It's going to be hard. It's pretty hard to, give somebody incentive, and there's no incentive to give them. I don't know. We just hope that things work out, that's all.
This isn't just a story about a mine closing down. This is the story about a community that could become just another name in a guidebook on ghost towns of British Columbia. Cassiar is a company town. No mine, no town. 360 of the 1,000 people who live here work directly for the mine. Their families depend on it. And they want to stay here. And it's certainly not for the love of the asbestos they dig from the ground.
Can I have the sugar, please? Yeah. Sugar. Watch the lid.
Family life at the McGill home. This may not be a typical Cassiar family. The McGills have 15 kids, 11 of them still living at home. But they are like the others in Cassiar when they talk about why they want to stay.
How can you explain this place to somebody from outside?
It would be very hard. It's a very friendly community, a safe place to raise your kids. Everybody knows everybody else's kids. Everybody watches out for everybody else. And it's just one of the few places left that are really caring. I hate to leave.
The McGills came to Cassiar 5 years ago. Jim is an accountant at the mine. 2 of their children work there as well.
People don't feel like work. Nobody knows what's going on. Every time we get off work, we hear new rumors about what's happening. One minute we're here and we work till June. The next minute we hear that there's the 3-week layoff in February and hardly any of us are going to be working. Nobody's telling us nothing.
People may have come to Cassiar for the jobs, but they end up staying for the lifestyle. Cassiar is a family town. It's got a very low turnover rate for a mining community, around 15%. They've got many of the services you'd only expect in a much larger community, including a brand new high school. It just opened this month. It cost $6 million to build, but the grads of 92 may be its first and only grads. Uncertainty is now the way of life in Cassiar. They don't take personal checks at the grocery store anymore. Supplies are beginning to dwindle.
We can't gear for
for any of the seasonal stuff, for the simple reason is we don't know what happens in 6 months. We're still in limbo. We have no choice whatsoever but to gear down.
Why the town is facing such hardship brings us, of course, back here to the mine. And it's the story of how the mine got into such serious financial difficulty.
They've been mining asbestos here for almost 40 years, and there's still plenty left, 10 to 20 years worth. They sell every bit of it. It's used to make cement and pipes. The problem here isn't supply and demand, it's how they get it out of the earth. For most of the 40 years, Cassiar was an open pit mine, but the asbestos is too deep in the earth now, and last year they began tunnel mining. It's the cost of moving underground that's killing them, far more than engineers predicted. The mountain is shifting, the tunnels are squeezing closed, and now the creditors are squeezing the company. Cassiar Mining is now $57 million in debt, $25 million of its debt to the province alone. The mine asked the government for another $13 million loan, but Victoria says it's too risky. The mine manager, Hedley Duffield, says the engineering problems are behind them.
We've learnt how to arrest the movement before it starts. And our ground support techniques have improved over the past 12 months as we've gone through this learning experience.
We want some answers from you. We want some answers. Well, it's dragging on for too long.
The largest town meeting in Cassiar's history. Of course, the McGills are here, and they, like the entire community, want answers. For the first time, they get to meet face-to-face with a cabinet minister, Dan Miller.
This is a very difficult issue, and I want to say that the government and the company are cooperating to the utmost in trying to deal with this issue.
The McGills and the others were told they won't be abandoned entirely. The forest minister guaranteed the province will keep the mine open until July, pay their severances, mortgages, moving expenses, and job retraining. It'll cost the province at least $13 million, the amount the company wanted to invest in the mine. Most feel at least some sense of relief.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
In 1874, a huge snowstorm hit the Cassiar Mountains of northern BC. Scores of miners were stranded, facing the onslaught of scurvy and starvation. Conditions were so dangerous, not even the Canadian Army considered mounting a rescue. But one brave gold miner refused to let them die. Her name was Nellie Cashman. Nellie had escaped the Irish potato famine and wound up in the gold fields of California. Like many miners, she lived a transient life, never marrying and forever following news of fresh gold discoveries.
Men are a nuisance anyway now, aren't they? I've nursed them, scolded them, and fought my own with them, and you have to treat them just like boys.
Nellie had recently arrived in BC when she heard news of the stranded Cassiar miners and leapt into action. At the age of 29, she organized 6 men to join her on an epic rescue mission. Starting in Victoria, Nellie and her expedition dragged 1,500 pounds of food and medicine across hundreds of miles of rugged terrain. It took 77 days. When they finally arrived in the Cassiar, they found nearly 100 starving men. The supplies prevented certain death, and her daring act earned Nellie the nickname the Angel of Cassiar.
Any man I ever met, if he needed my help, got it. After all, we pass this way only once, and it's up to us to help our fellows when they need us.
In March 1993, Cassiar declared bankruptcy, and the world fell apart for Cassiar residents losing their jobs, their homes, and their town within a short span of time. In this final segment of Open Connection, let us hear from the former residents of Cassiar.
It's nice to know that you are going to get some help to get out of here.
I've made preparations to leave this town. I didn't know where I was going, but I had a place to go to stay. But now I feel I have a far better chance.
At least there's some certainty now of what's going to happen in the immediate future. It looks like we're going to have a job for the next 6 months at least, and that gives us time to make some plans.
Is his people's strength if we believe in his way.
And so they face their uncertain future together, not knowing where they'll be living and working beyond summer. They have only a slim hope that some private investor will take a chance and keep the mine going.
While Cassiar's dilemma has remained a provincial problem, the federal government and the federal representative in this area can ill afford to pay a deaf ear to what could be devastating effects for the community and others in the Northwest. Skeena MP Jim Fulton has spent a great deal of time talking to officials with Princeton Mining and to the people of Cassiar, and admits while the situation is disastrous, it's something the mining resource sector continues to live with.
It's very sad to see any community, not just anywhere in BC, anywhere in the country, becoming a ghost town, which effectively is what appears to be the future for Cassiar. It eventually happens to almost any mineral-based community. I've had meetings with the president of the company, with the steelworkers, with people from the Ministry of Finance, the minister's office, and regrettably, the situation in terms of the development of the different levels within the McDame deposit. People have to remember they've gone from an above ground open pit to an underground operation, have had enormous cost overruns. They're into the province for about $25 million. The company was not able, at least so far, to put forward a restructuring plan with a significant amount of capital to allow independent assessors to suggest that they're going to be in a profitable situation in the near future. It would be quite a long period of time before they were back in black ink. But it's a tough time in the economy. We're looking at higher than usual unemployment here in BC and across the country. We're looking at a fairly slow mining sector right across Canada. And there aren't an awful lot of asbestos operations in Canada. The only other serious competition in Canada for Cassiar has been Baie Verte in eastern Canada. Mm-hmm. So it's a sad situation, but I think everyone has recognized, Mr. Little from the steelworkers and everyone else have made it quite clear if the company, if the private sector, Princeton, mm-hmm. and their shareholders aren't going to put money, serious money on the table to go ahead and redevelop another level, why should the taxpayers of British Columbia? And it's a tough financial decision, and it will be quite some time before someone else redevelops that deposit.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Open Connection. The greatest distance in the existence of man is not from here to there, but the connection from his mind to his heart. If we can conquer that distance, we can soar like an eagle and realize our immensity within. I'm Robert Pictou.